So the word was, hey, there's some banditos in Vegas. We own Nevada, and they don't have a hall pass. So we need to teach them a lesson. So we're on the way to Las Vegas from Skull Valley. You know, the way those cats ride is 100 miles an hour, 18 inches apart, 2 by 2, and there could be 10, 20, 40 dudes. And one mistake in that conga line is going to freaking wipe out everybody. So I get a hold of Slatella and said, dude, this thing's getting ready to break bad. I'm going to be put in a bad spot real quick. You need to freaking step in here and rescue us, because the Hells Angels told me when the banditos show up, if you don't shoot them before they get their kickstands down, we're going to shoot you. Slatella finds, with some Las Vegas Metro Police Department unit, finds this conga of banditos, traffic stops them, holds them. So me and these other cats show up to the conflict point, but the enemy never shows. But in the eyes of the Hells Angels, I was there. I was ready to take care of business. I walked away from that like a hero.
For decades, the Hells Angels have kept their darkest secrets hidden in a vault that's never been touched. But now, after years of speculation, the unimaginable has been uncovered. What the authorities found inside was far more than anyone could have guessed: hidden treasures, cryptic documents, and a shocking twist that could change everything we know about the notorious biker gang. You won't believe what's been locked away for all these years.
Yeah, I was wondering about this patch, man. And I just wanted to know, who gave you permission to wear that patch?
Tommy.
Who the hell is Tommy? I think you want to talk to my president here.
He was asking me about the patches that we have on the back of our jackets, the embroidered.
Well, what we're wearing, there's an MC underneath that.
Yeah, we don't have that on ours.
Well, you must not be in a motorcycle club, huh?
No, we're not. We're just a group of guys that like to ride together. No.
And Turtle, I'm Tommy. I'm the one that gave them these guys these vests, but in light, we've never found out or understood what the formalities are to be a club. And we're all, like, in due respect, I guess we're enamored with, you know, your world, the world of other bike clubs that run a patch and show that camaraderie.
It's not just us. That is a national level for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're purple, green, red, or blue. You can belong to that organization representing a motorcycle club. But that will be up to your adventures within the nature of where you go with this.
Well, we'd like to get it right, get it better, but somewhere in your tail smoke.
Well, that's probably where we'll see. It's going to be smoke. Like I said before, if you can keep up, you'll probably stay up.
Can we roll with you guys a little further down towards the prison run?
Yet to be seen, but we're getting ready to leave.
All righty.
All right.
Thank you.
You guys ready?
It's pretty intense. Yeah. But I think for now, we all know we got to be talking a little bit further, guys, what we do or don't want to do. But for now, let's keep on the ride.
Hey, Tommy, I don't want to get our asses kicked here.
No, but they said we can still ride with them, so I think
they didn't seem real happy about me having a patch.
All right,
Are
but
we going to be all right with that?
you told us we need to find more about our journey, about what we want to be. Federation.
The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club is one of the most notorious and widely recognized outlaw biker gangs in the world. Founded in the late 1940s in California, the group quickly grew in both size and infamy, establishing itself as a symbol of rebellion, independence, and criminality. Over the decades, their activities and influence spread across the globe, leaving a lasting impact on popular culture, law enforcement, and communities alike. Yet behind the roaring engines and the leather jackets, there's been much more to the Hells Angels than meets the eye.
I was at a Red Robin, and I said, hey, I never ate there. Let's go try that place. I still never have ate there. So we went in there, and I said, hey, I got to take a piss. So I ran into the bathroom. I had shorts on, you know? So, and I had that down the back of my legs, the Hells Angels on the back of my legs, and I ran into the bathroom. I heard the door open up, and when I was washing my hands, I looked over at the guy, you know, and he was just basically like standing like this, looking in the mirror. He wasn't doing anything but this. I looked at him, and then I saw the Mongol tattoo on his arm, and I kind of glanced at him a little bit, and when I got done, I shook my hands, you know, the water off, and I went, and I kind of chuckled a little bit, and he walks up like all badass, you know, and he goes, hey, what are you laughing about? He said, what, did you ride with a club or something? So real stupid, I put my hand out, and I says, hey, how you doing, man? I'm Pee-wee. And he grabs my hand. I grab his hand, I pull him into me, and I go, yeah, I used to ride with the Hells Angels. And he couldn't pull his hand out fast enough for mine.
The origins of the Hells Angels began in the immediate post-war years, a time of social upheaval and change. The end of World War II marked a shift in American society, with many veterans returning home to find that the world they left behind had changed in their absence. The disillusionment felt by many of these men led them to seek out new communities where they could forge their own paths, free from the constraints of mainstream society. In California, a group of veterans began forming motorcycle clubs, and one such club, originally known as the Off Bastards of Bloomington, would eventually evolve into the Hells Angels. The name Hells Angels was chosen to embody the defiance and rugged individuality that the members sought to uphold. It wasn't long before the group adopted a more formal structure, becoming the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, with chapters forming in cities across the United States. While they started out as a group of passionate motorcycle enthusiasts, their activities quickly expanded to include more illicit ventures. The club's members began engaging in various criminal activities, including theft, extortion, smuggling, and later, large-scale drug trafficking. As their criminal empire grew, so did their reputation for violence and intimidation. By the 1960s, the Hells Angels had become infamous for their violent clashes with rival gangs and law enforcement. The club's involvement in illegal drug trades, such as smuggling marijuana and later, cocaine, marked the beginning of their transition into a global criminal network. Their reputation as a feared and powerful organization spread beyond the United States, with Hells Angels chapters springing up across Europe, Canada, and Australia. Despite their criminal activities, they maintained a public image of rebellion, with their members often being romanticized as outlaws and rebels fighting against societal norms. However, it was the Hells Angels' involvement in the narcotics trade that truly set them apart. The club became deeply entrenched in the international drug trade, working as a key distributor of illicit substances across the world. This level of involvement in drug trafficking not only provided the Hells Angels with an incredible amount of wealth, but also cemented their role as one of the most influential criminal organizations in modern history. Their criminal activities were not limited to drug trafficking. The Hells Angels were also known for their involvement in various forms of organized crime, including arms dealing, prostitution rings, and extortion schemes. In many cases, they operated as a shadowy, invisible presence within these industries, using their network to shield themselves from detection by law enforcement. They had a reputation for using fear and intimidation to maintain control, and anyone who crossed them often faced brutal retribution. Law enforcement agencies across the world took notice of the club's criminal activities, but despite numerous attempts to dismantle their operations, the Hells Angels always seemed to remain one step ahead. What made the Hells Angels so effective in maintaining their power and avoiding capture was the tight-knit nature of their operations. Each chapter of the club operated with a high degree of autonomy, but they all shared a common set of values and rules. Trust was paramount, and members were bound by a strict code of loyalty and secrecy. This secrecy, coupled with their ability to evade law enforcement, allowed the Hells Angels to operate with a level of impunity that few other criminal organizations could match. As their empire expanded, so too did their wealth. With the proceeds from their illegal enterprises, the Hells Angels acquired luxury properties, cars, and other assets that further solidified their place in the criminal underworld. They were not just a motorcycle gang, they were a sprawling criminal syndicate with a global reach. The money flowed freely, but the club was also aware of the need to protect their wealth and assets. This led to the creation of secret vaults and hidden storage locations, where they could keep their earnings and important documents safe from authorities and rival gangs alike. The vaults, which were strategically placed in undisclosed locations, served as more than just a means of storing money. They were also used to house weapons, illicit materials, and sensitive information that could compromise the club's operations. For decades, these vaults remained largely unknown to the public and authorities. Only a select few members knew of their existence, and even fewer knew their exact locations. The secrecy surrounding these vaults only added to the mystique and power of the Hells Angels. As the club's influence grew, so did the rumors surrounding the vaults, with whispers circulating about what might be hidden inside. In many ways, the vaults became a symbol of the Hells Angels' power and control. They were more than just physical spaces, they were representations of the club's dominance in the criminal world. The vaults served as a reminder that despite their growing fame and notoriety, the Hells Angels were always watching and ready to protect their empire at all costs. For years these vaults remained untouched, their contents locked away in secrecy, until one fateful day when the world would finally get a glimpse of what lay within. The discovery of the Hells Angels' secret vaults marked the beginning of a new chapter in the club's history. It was a moment that would uncover the true scale of their operations and reveal the shocking wealth and power that had been hidden for so long. For decades, the Hells Angels had carefully guarded their secrets, but eventually, the truth began to surface. The opening of these vaults would not only expose the club's hidden assets, but also offer a glimpse into the complex and shadowy world that the Hells Angels had created over the years. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club's operations have always been shrouded in secrecy, but as law enforcement agencies and investigators have dug deeper into their activities, they've uncovered a world far darker and more complex than anyone could have imagined. While their public image of rebellious freedom and thrill-seeking adventure has often masked their true nature, the real story of the Hells Angels is far more chilling and far-reaching. The club has been linked to a host of illegal activities, from drug trafficking and arms dealing to organized crime syndicates operating globally. While their origins were rooted in the post-war disillusionment of American veterans, their rapid rise as one of the world's most infamous criminal organizations was no accident. By the 1960s, the Hells Angels had evolved from a group of rebellious motorcycle enthusiasts into a tightly knit criminal syndicate with connections to powerful figures in the underworld. They were no longer just a club, they had become a shadowy empire with interests in a range of illicit businesses, both in the United States and internationally. One of the most lucrative and widespread activities that the Hells Angels became involved in was the international drug trade. By the 1970s, the club had solidified its position as one of the most significant players in the smuggling and distribution of narcotics. They established key relationships with other criminal organizations, both in the United States and abroad, and began to control large portions of the global cocaine and marijuana trade. Their involvement in the drug trade was extensive, and they became known for their ability to move vast quantities of drugs across borders, often using their network of motorcycle clubs as couriers. The Hells Angels didn't just rely on their reputation for violence and intimidation to stay at the top of the drug trade, they also built a network of smuggling routes that spanned the globe. In the United States, they developed a reputation for being able to move drugs across state lines with little interference from law enforcement. They had a vast network of safe houses, underground storage facilities, and hidden tunnels, many of which were designed specifically to conceal drugs from detection by authorities. The Hells Angels' ability to hide their operations and avoid detection was a key part of their success in the drug trade. Their smuggling network wasn't limited to just the United States. By the 1980s, the Hells Angels had expanded their reach, establishing a strong presence in Canada, Europe, and even parts of South America. Their international connections allowed them to move large quantities of drugs with relative ease, and they became known for their ability to outsmart law enforcement at every turn. Many of their operations were carried out under the cover of legitimate businesses, such as trucking companies, import-export businesses, and even motorcycle shops, which helped to disguise their true activities. In addition to drug trafficking, the Hells Angels were heavily involved in arms dealing. With their network of international contacts and their reputation for violence, they became a valuable source of weapons for other criminal organizations and groups involved in organized crime. They traded arms with various groups, including cartels in South America, terrorist organizations in the Middle East, and criminal syndicates in Europe. The Hells Angels were known to stockpile weapons, including automatic rifles, handguns, grenades, and even rocket launchers in various hidden locations around the world. These weapons were often sold to the highest bidder, fueling conflict and violence in different parts of the world. The Hells Angels' reach extended well beyond the drug trade and arms dealing. They were also involved in a wide range of other criminal activities, including extortion, human trafficking, and money laundering. The club's reputation for violence and intimidation made them a go-to source for other criminals who needed muscle or who wanted to send a message to their rivals. The Hells Angels provided protection to businesses in exchange for money, and they were known to extort local businesses by demanding payment for protection from other criminals. If anyone refused to pay, the Hells Angels were notorious for using violence and threats to ensure compliance. The club also had a hand in human trafficking, particularly in the trafficking of women for prostitution. They maintained brothels and ran prostitution rings across the United States and other parts of the world. Women were often coerced or forced into working for the Hells Angels, who profited heavily from their exploitation. These activities were carried out under the radar, with the club going to great lengths to avoid detection by law enforcement. The Hells Angels' vast criminal empire required extensive resources, and the club's leadership was skilled at hiding their wealth and assets from authorities. The club's members were experts at laundering money, using a network of legitimate businesses and shell companies to conceal the proceeds of their criminal activities. They also used their criminal connections to smuggle cash across borders, often using motorcycles or trucks to transport large sums of money. These efforts helped the Hells Angels maintain their power and wealth, even as law enforcement agencies attempted to crack down on their operations. Despite their many criminal activities, the Hells Angels maintained a sense of loyalty and brotherhood among their members. The club's code of silence, known as the Omerta, ensured that members did not speak about the club's operations or activities to outsiders. This code of silence made it difficult for law enforcement to infiltrate the club or gather information on their illegal enterprises. The Hells Angels were also known for their strict hierarchy and discipline, which helped to maintain order within the club and prevented internal conflicts from disrupting their operations. One of the most striking aspects of the Hells Angels' operations was their ability to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. Despite numerous arrests, investigations, and undercover operations, the club's leadership managed to avoid serious legal consequences for many years. They were experts at evading detection, using their vast network of contacts in law enforcement, the military, and other influential sectors of society to avoid prosecution. The Hells Angels also maintained a global presence, which made it difficult for authorities to coordinate a unified effort to dismantle their operations. The secret vaults that the Hells Angels maintained throughout the years played a key role in their ability to protect their assets and maintain their criminal empire. These vaults, which were hidden in undisclosed locations around the world, were used to store money, drugs, weapons, and sensitive documents. The vaults were carefully designed to be impenetrable, with reinforced concrete walls, steel doors, and sophisticated security systems. The Hells Angels went to great lengths to ensure that only a select few knew the locations of these vaults, and they took extreme measures to protect their contents. For years, the existence of these secret vaults was nothing more than a rumor. But as law enforcement agencies continued to investigate the Hells Angels, the truth began to emerge. In the early 2000s, authorities began uncovering the first of these vaults, revealing the full extent of the Hells Angels' operations. What they found inside these vaults was nothing short of astonishing. Inside the vaults, investigators discovered millions of dollars in cash, weapons, and illicit materials. They uncovered ledgers detailing the Hells Angels' involvement in drug trafficking, arms dealing, and other criminal enterprises. The vaults also contained records of bribes paid to law enforcement officers, politicians, and other figures in positions of power. These documents provided a rare and invaluable insight into the inner workings of the Hells Angels and their global network of criminal operations. The discovery of the vaults was a major turning point in the battle against the Hells Angels. It marked the beginning of the end for the club's reign of terror, as law enforcement agencies across the world began to piece together the full scope of their activities. The information uncovered in the vaults was used to launch a series of investigations and operations aimed at dismantling the Hells Angels' criminal empire. While many of the club's leaders were eventually arrested and convicted, the Hells Angels remain a force to be reckoned with. The club's legacy is one of violence, criminality, and secrecy, and its influence continues to be felt in many parts of the world. The vaults may have been opened, but the true extent of the Hells Angels' criminal activities may never be fully known. As investigators continue to uncover new details about their operations, the Hells Angels remain a reminder of the power and reach of organized crime. The discovery of the Hells Angels' secret vaults has exposed a staggering amount of criminal activity that spanned decades and touched multiple continents. What investigators found inside these hidden storages painted a chilling picture of an international criminal empire that was meticulously organized and strategically shielded from law enforcement. The vaults contained not only money, drugs, and weapons, but also documents that revealed the Hells Angels' extensive and calculated operations. As the vaults were slowly opened and their contents meticulously cataloged, law enforcement agencies around the world gained an unprecedented look into the world of one of the most feared and mysterious organizations in history. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, despite its seemingly disjointed and rebellious exterior, had long been operating as a criminal syndicate with far-reaching connections. What was once thought to be a loose association of motorcycle enthusiasts quickly became known for its involvement in organized crime on a global scale. The club's members were infamous for their violent acts, but it was the hidden and darker side of their operations that shocked the world once investigators began to uncover it. For years, the Hells Angels had been careful to operate under the radar, blending their legitimate activities with a web of criminal enterprises that they ran in the shadows. They had long been involved in illicit trades, such as drug trafficking, arms dealing, and human trafficking. The secret vaults, which had been hidden in undisclosed locations, served as storage spaces for the illicit gains the club was amassing. As the vaults were opened, it became clear that these weren't just places for storing cash, they were the foundation of the Hells Angels criminal empire. Investigators found that the Hells Angels maintained an extensive network of drug operations across the globe. Inside the vaults, they uncovered detailed records of drug shipments that had been moved from South America to North America, Europe, and beyond. The documents revealed the scale of the club's operations, showing how they controlled large portions of the global drug trade. The Hells Angels were no longer simply a criminal motorcycle gang. They were an organized syndicate that controlled entire regions of the narcotics trade, operating with precision and efficiency. One of the most shocking findings inside the vaults was the scale of the club's involvement in arms dealing. As law enforcement continued to sift through the materials inside the vaults, it became evident that the Hells Angels had connections with weapons dealers in multiple countries. They had been supplying illegal arms to various groups and organizations involved in global conflict, terrorism, and organized crime. The club's reach stretched across borders, and their access to weaponry was far more extensive than most law enforcement agencies had previously realized. The arms dealing was just one aspect of the Hells Angels criminal. Investigators discovered that the club was also heavily involved in money laundering, a critical part of maintaining the flow of illicit funds. The Hells Angels used a network of businesses, from strip clubs to car dealerships, as fronts for their money laundering operations. These businesses allowed them to clean their drug profits and weapons sales, funneling the cash through legitimate channels to make it appear as if it came from lawful sources. The level of sophistication in their operations meant that law enforcement struggled to trace the flow of money and uncover the full scale of the criminal. Human trafficking was another dark aspect of the Hells Angels operations. While many had assumed the club's primary focus was on drugs and arms, evidence uncovered in the vault revealed that they had been trafficking women across borders for exploitation in the sex trade. Investigators found records of brothels and prostitution rings in multiple countries that were operated and protected by Hells Angels members. These women, often coerced or forced into the trade, were trafficked from impoverished areas and sold into sex work. The extent of this human trafficking network was far larger than initially thought, and it was only when the vaults were opened that the true horror of this aspect of the Hells Angels operations was revealed. One of the more disturbing revelations from the vaults was the level of violence that the Hells Angels employed to maintain their control over various criminal activities. Inside the vault, law enforcement uncovered a series of photographs, documents, and testimonies that illustrated the club's brutal enforcement tactics. The Hells Angels used violence not just to intimidate rivals, but to ensure compliance from both their own members and the communities they controlled. The club's brutal methods included kidnapping, torture, and even murder. These violent acts were carried out to protect the club's interests and eliminate anyone who posed a threat to their operations. As investigators continued to examine the vaults, they found evidence that the Hells Angels had infiltrated various sectors of society, including law enforcement, politics, and the military. They had used bribery and coercion to secure protection from authorities, ensuring that their criminal activities went undetected for years. The vaults contained lists of contacts and blackmail material that the club had used to manipulate politicians, police officers, and other figures of authority. This level of infiltration allowed the Hells Angels to continue their operations with little fear of interference from law enforcement. Perhaps one of the most chilling aspects of the vault discoveries was the sheer scale of the Hells Angels' international reach. What had once seemed like isolated incidents of criminal activity tied to small groups of motorcycle enthusiasts was now revealed to be part of a sprawling global network of crime. The club's influence stretched from North America to Europe, Asia, and even South America. They had established alliances with various criminal organizations around the world, including drug cartels, arms dealers, and human traffickers. These alliances allowed the Hells Angels to operate with relative impunity, knowing that they had the protection and support of powerful figures in the criminal underworld. The vaults also contained a wealth of information about the Hells Angels' internal operations. Detailed records revealed how the club was structured, with a clear hierarchy and strict codes of conduct. The leadership of the Hells Angels was divided into various chapters, each with its own set of rules and responsibilities. The club's leadership was shrouded in secrecy, with only a small group of individuals privy to the most sensitive information. The vaults contained numerous documents that detailed the club's plans, including upcoming drug shipments, weapons deals, and criminal dissection and terminal. This wealth of information gave law enforcement a rare glimpse into the workings of the Hells Angels, and it became a valuable tool in dismantling their empire. The discovery of the Hells Angels vaults and the subsequent revelations about their criminal operations sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community. For years, the club had been a shadowy figure in the world of organized crime. But with the information from the vaults, investigators were finally able to piece together the full extent of their operations. The Hells Angels empire, once thought to be invincible, was slowly starting to unravel. While many of the club's leaders were arrested and convicted, the Hells Angels continued to operate in various parts of the world. Their ability to adapt and survive in the face of law enforcement pressure has made them a dangerous and enduring criminal force. The vaults may have been opened, but the full impact of the Hells Angels' criminal activities is still being felt today. The vaults not only revealed the depth of the Hells Angels' criminal empire, but also served as a reminder of the lengths to which the club had gone to protect its interests. They had built an extensive network of criminals, businesses, and corrupt officials that shielded them from law enforcement for years. But now, as the vaults continue to be uncovered, the true scale of their activities is being brought to light. The Hells Angels' legacy of violence, drug trafficking, arms dealing, and human exploitation is one that will continue to haunt the world for years to come. The continued examination of the vaults led to the discovery of a complex financial infrastructure that the Hells Angels had built up over the years. What seemed like a small, disorganized group of rebellious motorcyclists had grown into a global network of criminal activity. The vaults contained a staggering amount of financial records from offshore. The club had cleverly disguised their criminal profits through legitimate businesses that operated across a wide range of industries. These businesses were not only used to launder money, but to give the appearance of a law-abiding organization. The scale of this operation was breathtaking. The Hells Angels had invested heavily in coming from the strip to clubs and bars to car dealerships and construction companies. They had created an empire of fronts that would allow them to funnel dirty money into the mainstream economy. But it wasn't just the scale of these businesses that was staggering. It was the way they managed to manipulate financial systems in their favor. Through complex schemes involving shell companies and offshore accounts, the Hells Angels were able to move their illicit earnings around the world with ease, making it almost impossible to trace the flow of funds. The vaults contained intricate records detailing how the club managed to use these businesses as a cover for their criminal activities. These businesses not only served as a front for their illicit income, but also provided a network through which they could control the flow of money, drugs, and even weapons. The level of sophistication involved in the Hells Angels' money laundering operations was on par with some of the most well-established criminal syndicates in the world. As investigators pored over the financial documents found in the vault, they began to uncover a web of financial transactions that stretched across several continents. These included transfers to countries in South America, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East, where the Hells Angels had established ties with other criminal organizations. The vaults contained a treasure trove of evidence that painted a picture of a global criminal network that was operating just beneath the surface of legitimate society. But money laundering was not the only activity that the Hells Angels had perfected over the years. Another chilling discovery was the extent to which the organization had infiltrated local and federal law enforcement. It had long been suspected that the Hells Angels maintained relationships with corrupt officers who turned a blind eye to their criminal activity. What was uncovered inside the vaults, however, went far beyond mere suspicion. Evidence in the form of communications between Hells Angels members and law enforcement officials from across the United States and abroad showed that the club had actively cultivated relationships with corrupt officers for exchange for protection or information. These relationships went beyond just the local level. There was evidence that the Hells Angels had connections with federal law enforcement agencies as well. This discovery proved that the club's reach was far deeper than anyone had previously imagined, and it also shed light on why they had been able to operate for so long without detection. The evidence uncovered inside the vaults also revealed how the Hells Angels were able to maintain their rights. The club had established a series of alliances with other criminal organizations, both large and small, to protect their interests and expand their territory. These alliances allowed them to operate in countries and cities where they otherwise would have been too vulnerable to law enforcement intervention. They had created a network of protection and influence that extended across national borders, making it nearly impossible for authorities to dismantle their operations. The documents found in the vaults provided a roadmap of these alliances, showing how the Hells Angels had forged partnerships with notorious drug cartels, arms dealers, and human trafficking rings. One of the most disturbing revelations from the vaults was the level of control the Hells Angels had over entire communities. In cities and towns where the club had a presence, they maintained a tight grip on local businesses, transportation networks, and even political figures. The club used violence and intimidation to ensure that their interests were protected. They didn't just want to make money, they wanted to dominate entire regions, creating a criminal empire where they were the undisputed authority. Evidence of this came in the form of contracts and agreements with local businesses that had been coerced into providing protection money to the Hells Angels. These businesses, many of them family-owned or small enterprises, were forced to pay for protection in exchange for the club's tolerance of their operations. The documents also revealed that the Hells Angels were not shy about using extreme violence to make their point. There were numerous reports of brutal assaults, bombings, and even murders used to intimidate those who did not comply with their demand. As the investigation into the vaults progressed, the scale of the Hells Angels' global reach became even clearer. Their operations extended from the United States to Canada, Australia, Europe, and beyond. They had established chapters in nearly every major city around the world, each one operating as a small criminal syndicate in its own right. These chapters, though technically independent, were all interconnected and operated under the same set of rules dictated by the club's leadership. The documents found in the vaults included detailed records of these chapters' activities, from drug trafficking routes to extortion schemes. The Hells Angels were not just a group of outlaw bikers, they were a transnational criminal syndicate with fingers in nearly every pie of organized crime. Perhaps the most shocking discovery came from the internal documents that were found inside the vaults. These documents, which included minutes from club meetings, detailed the club's internal structure and operations. The Hells Angels, it seemed, were not just a loosely organized group of rebels. They were a highly organized hierarchical structure with clear rules and regulations.
The leadership of the Hells Angels was divided into various levels, with members taking on roles as officers, enforcers, and recruiters. Each level had its own set of responsibilities, and the club operated with military-like precision. The discovery of these internal documents was a significant breakthrough for investigators, as it allowed them to understand how the Hells Angels operated on a daily basis. It also shed light on the brutal initiation process that new members had to go through, which often involved violent acts or criminal activities designed to prove their loyalty to the club. The vaults also revealed the role that women played in the Hells Angels criminal empire. While the club was predominantly male, there was a disturbing number of women involved in their operations. These women were often used as couriers for drugs or money, but they were also involved in the club's human trafficking operations. Some women were trafficked for sex, while others were used to smuggle drugs and weapons across borders. The club's involvement in human trafficking had long been suspected, but the documents found in the vaults provided concrete evidence of the scale and scope of this operation. The discovery of the Hells Angels' secret vaults marked a turning point in the fight against organized crime. What had been a shadowy, elusive organization had now been exposed in full, with its darkest secrets laid bare for all to see. The vaults contained not only a wealth of evidence about the club's criminal activities, but also a roadmap for dismantling their empire. As the investigation continued, it became clear that the Hells Angels would never be the same again. The global criminal network that they had built over decades was slowly starting to crumble, and with it, the fear and power that had once made them untouchable. However, the battle was far from over. As law enforcement agencies around the world moved to take down the Hells Angels, they faced a long and difficult road ahead. But thanks to the evidence found in those secret vaults, the world was finally getting a glimpse into the true extent of the Hells Angels' criminal empire.